Premier David Makhura says the newly signed Township Economic Development Bill will link township economies with big players in other sectors of the economy. The Gauteng Premier signed the bill into law at Orlando in Soweto today. The legislation aims to promote economic transformation, and this includes meaningful participation of previously excluded persons in the Gauteng township economy.
We also want to integrate township businesses with the mainstream of the economy. That's what transformation is about. You can't just remain in the town. Where if you are a good manufacturer of something, a product or a service, we have to link you with the mainstream industries and major sectors of the economy.
Let's get you more on this. We're joined by Parks Tau, MEC for Economic Development, Agriculture, Environment and Rural Development. Mr. Tau, thank you for your patience and thank you for availing yourself this afternoon. Perhaps just to underscore the importance of this piece of legislation, or how and why it came about, when we talk about a township economy, how do you characterize it?
Thank you very much, Tutu, and good afternoon. We are looking at those places that are historically disadvantaged, that were designed as dormitories for labor reserves by the apartheid regime, and therefore do not enable black people in particular located in townships to have access to an array of economic opportunities, including industrial, commercial, and other opportunities that necessarily an urban system would create. So we are defining townships as those places that were historically designated for black people and therefore designated for exclusion. It is the economic activity that takes place in those townships that we are focusing on and ensuring that we are able to expand the type of enterprises that are created in townships, that we are able to designate township enterprise zones in which commercial and industrial activity would take place, and would be able to concentrate a number of support mechanisms for those enterprises, including dedicated procurement from us as provincial government, but also partnering with the private sector to ensure that we provide access to opportunities for township-based enterprises.
During the consultation with the various stakeholders, amongst which would one would assume would be the people on the ground, what did they tell you in terms of one maybe space where some of these zones will be dedicated or developed, and what did they tell you about the conditions under which they operate, especially when you take a look at a lack of service delivery, for instance, which is already inhibiting township businesses?
The key people that the people raise, the key issue rather that people raise, is in relation to access to land and property from which to trade and develop their enterprises, including industrial enterprises. They identified access to safe and reliable public services, in particular electricity as an inhibitor.
Mr. Tau, I think we are losing you there intermittently. Are you still with us? Okay, unfortunately, it would appear not. We'll try and reestablish the connection and bring you detail to that story. You are back, Mr. Tau. I believe you were detailing in terms of consultations, people telling you about land that they would like in order for them to be able to operate.
Essentially, the key issues that people were raising were access to land and property, access to utilities, in particular electricity, and the reliability thereof, but also in terms of access to market, and of course the financing mechanisms that we have to put in place. And the Act has been responsive to the key issues that the people have raised. The Premier announced that we've established the Township Economic Partnership Fund, that we're partnering with public and private sector entities to ensure access to finance, that we'll be releasing land and property to township-based enterprises, that we've created a regulatory run of enterprises that historically would not have been regulated to gain access to recognition in the public sector. So we are responding to the key issues that people have raised. And of course, access to market, as I said. We have committed as the provincial government that 40% of our own procurement would be directed towards township-based enterprises, in particular in the township economic or enterprise zones that we're targeting and will be designated in the next few weeks.
Mr. Dawood, the bill reads, and I quote, to provide for the promotion and development of the township economy and to create a conducive environment for the attainment of that purpose. So when we speak of a conducive environment, I guess I'm just trying to visualize it in my mind, or for somebody who perhaps operates a tavern or somebody who operates a place where there's a number of people that can congregate, be it from Friday to Sunday. However, they are in a residential area, which causes problems for some of the people who are living in that area and many other informal businesses. What does a conducive environment look like?
A conducive environment includes creating an appropriate regulatory framework that would allow that activity to take place. And let me just pick up on the example that you're making. If you know historically black townships, you would realize that, in fact, taverns are located in residential areas and in many instances would not be compliant to a whole range of regulations. So we need to create a regulatory framework that enables them to thrive without it impacting negatively on the residential amenity. We need to ensure that we can designate spaces for particular activities, and if you think about motor mechanics, panel beaters, and so on, these activities need to happen in an industrial space. We need to designate and create the appropriate industrial spaces and ensure that we provide the necessary equipment and support mechanisms that would also enable us as the provincial government to ensure maintenance of our own vehicles there as the provincial government, but give confidence to the private sector and private individuals that those enterprises have the capability and capacity to do a good job at the work that you've given them. It is those sort of systems that we need to create. So it is regulatory, it is financial, it is technical support. It's also about enterprise and supplier development. And these are the programs that we've put in place. We have partnered, for example, with the University of Johannesburg to create a support mechanism to our own departments to facilitate enterprise and supplier development so that we can give direct support to township-based enterprises to meet the requisite capabilities, standards, and regulatory systems that would enable them to trade not just with the public service or public sector, but would also be able to trade with private entities.
We've also heard about support for the taxi economy and the upliftment of township retail businesses, and most people just conduct their businesses from their backyards when you think retail. Or am I limiting people here?
Actually, we want to literally move the backyard residential estate economy in the townships to the front yard. If you think about it, people have rented out their backyards for shacks, they've built 2 rooms and garages, and other initiatives that enable them to either earn an additional income or even a primary income in many instances. The partners that we're engaging with are now saying, how do we create these into recognized and supported enterprises that can thrive and exist in the townships without any hindrance? So we've got a support mechanism for that, and it includes financing, it includes technical support, but it also mitigates the problem of people seeking, for example, or people having to meet the requirements that include them mortgaging literally their own houses to be able to develop this. And we're saying there's an alternative way in which these initiatives can be supported. If you look at the taxi economy as an example, the reality is this is the mode of transport that the majority of people in the townships use to access the different parts of the city and different parts of the province. Now, how do we ensure that the destinations from which they move, that the ranks in which they are located, become centers of economic activity? How do we ensure that they gain access to opportunities along the value chain? We reached out to Toyota, for example, and said, you guys provide the bulk of the taxis that are moving in our townships. How do we ensure that these enterprises in the townships are able to leverage at different levels of the value chain? Post the sale of your vehicle, how to ensure that people are able to do maintenance, are able to do all sorts of requirements that you would have as an original equipment manufacturer that enable them to become active participants in an industry that already is existing, but the townships are unable gain advantage from. And I should say comfortably that Toyota and many others have said, we're prepared to come to the party, we're prepared to partner with the Gauteng provincial government and with the industry. We've reached out to the taxi industry, and they have said, okay, we can run a few pilot sites, 1 or 2 in Soweto, and a few others in the East Rand and Enivronment in particular, so that we are able to run what in many instances we say in the provincial government are prototype sites. So these are not pilots that would be started and left along the way. These are prototypes from which we would be able to create best practice and expand this throughout the province.
Mr. Tau, this is a beautiful piece of legislation, but I can't help but wonder in my mind, or I can't help but go here in my mind, when you take a look at the landscape of traditional townships in South Africa, it's not just, especially in Gauteng, it's not just Soweto that we speak of. You've got Tembisa, you've got many other townships where you've got areas that are developed, and you've got places like Kliptown, for instance, where it's a number of informal settlements. In terms of priorities, you know, you'll have some people that say, well, who do you prioritize? Where do you start? And where do you go?
Well, firstly, all historically black townships are a priority in terms of economic activity. We will, however, be designating the initial set of what we call township enterprise zones. We currently have developed a draft list from which we are going to be engaging stakeholders and saying, we've got a draft list, let's get your engagement, let's get your contribution to this draft list, and on the basis of that, we can all agree as parties that these are the places where we start, and this is what we need to make sure it's able to work. And it is important that we have these demonstration sites so that we can concentrate our efforts and initiatives around these and demonstrate that these initiatives can work in practice, and these enterprises that are based in the townships that seek to expand or create themselves in the townships have an opportunity to participate and leverage off the legislation that we've created.
We'll be keeping a keen eye on the rollout. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. Tau, MEC for Economic Development, Agriculture, Environment and Rural Development.